Hi, girls. Chapter 4 was interrupted, so we're just going to pick up where we left off. So, Tommy Stubbins was asking Dr. Doolittle why he wanted to learn the language of the shellfish. Well, you see, said Dr. Doolittle, some of the shellfish are the oldest kind of animals in the world that we know of. We find their shells in the rocks, turned to stone, thousands of years old. Do you know what those are called? Fossils, that's right. So I feel quite sure that if I could only get to talk their language, I should be able to learn a whole lot about what the world was like ages and ages and ages ago, you see? But couldn't some other of the animals tell you as well? I don't think so, said the doctor, prodding the sausages with a fork. To be sure, the monkeys I knew in Africa some time ago were very helpful in telling me about bygone days, but they only went back 1,000 years or so. No, I am certain that the oldest history in the world is to be had from the shellfish, and from them only. You see, most of the other animals that were alive in those very ancient times have now become extinct. Have you ever learned any shellfish language yet? I asked. No, I've only just begun. I wanted this particular kind of a pipefish because he is half a shellfish and half an ordinary fish. I went all the way to the eastern Mediterranean after him, but I'm very much afraid he isn't going to be a great deal of help to me. To tell you the truth, I'm rather disappointed in his appearance. He doesn't look very intelligent, does he? No, he doesn't, I agreed. Ah, said the doctor, the sausages are done to a turn. Come along, hold your plate near, and let me give you some. Then we sat down at the kitchen table and started a hearty meal. It was a wonderful kitchen, that. I had many meals there afterward, and I found it a better place to eat in than the grandest dining room in the world. It was so cozy and homelike and warm. It was so handy for the food, too. You took it right off the fire, hot, and put it on the table and ate it. And you could watch your toast toasting at the fender and see it didn't burn while you drank your soup. And if you had forgotten to put the salt on the table, you didn't have to get up and go into another room to fetch it. You just reached round and took the big wooden box off the dresser behind you. Then the fireplace, the biggest fireplace you ever saw, was like a room in itself. You could get right inside it, even when the logs were burning, and sit on the wide seats on either side and roast chestnuts after the meal was over, or listen to the kettle sing, or tell stories, or look at picture books by the light of the fire. It was a marvelous kitchen. It was like the doctor, comfortable, sensible, friendly, and solid. While we were gobbling away, the door suddenly opened, and in marched the duck, Dab-Dab, and the dog, Jip, dragging sheets and pillowcases behind them over the clean-tiled floor. The doctor, seeing how surprised I was, exclaimed, "They're just going to air the bedding for me in front of the fire. Dab-Dab is a perfect treasure of a housekeeper. She never forgets anything. I had a sister once who used to keep house for me. Poor dear Sarah. I wonder how she's getting on. I haven't seen her in many years. But she wasn't nearly as good as Dab-Dab. Have another sausage?" The doctor turned and said a few words to the dog and the duck in some strange talk and signs. They seemed to understand him perfectly. "Can you talk in squirrel language?" I asked. "Oh, yes. That is quite an easy language," said the doctor. "You could learn it yourself without a great deal of trouble. But why do you ask?" "Because I have a sick squirrel at home," I said. "I took it away from a hawk, but two of its legs are badly hurt, and I wanted very much to have you see it if you would. Shall I bring it tomorrow?" "Well, if its leg is badly broken, I think I had better see it tonight. It may be too late to do much, but I'll come home with you and to take a look at it." So presently we felt the clothes by the fire, and mine were found to be quite dry. I took them upstairs to the bedroom and changed, and when I came down, the doctor was already waiting for me with his little black bag full of medicines and bandages. "Come along," he said. "The rain has stopped now." Outside it had grown bright again, and the evening sky was all red with the setting sun, and thrushes were singing in the garden as we opened the gate to go down onto the road. Chapter 5, Polynesia. "I think your house is the most interesting house I was ever in," I said as we set off in the direction of the town. "May I come and see you again tomorrow?" "Certainly," said the doctor. "Come any day you like. Tomorrow I shall show you the garden and my private zoo." "Oh, you have a zoo?" I asked. "Yes," said he. "The larger animals are too big for the house, so I keep the zoo in the garden. It is not a very big collection, but it is interesting in its way." "It must be splendid," I said, "to be able to talk the languages of the different animals. Do you think I could ever learn to do that?" "Oh, surely," said the doctor, "with practice. You have to be very patient, you know. You really ought to have Polynesia to start you. It was she who gave me my first lessons." "Who is Polynesia?" I asked. "Polynesia was a West African parrot I had. She isn't with me now any more," said the doctor sadly. "Why, is she dead?" "Oh, no," said the doctor. "She is still living, I hope. But when we reached Africa, she seemed so glad to get back to her own country. She wept for joy. And when the time came for me to come back here, I had not the heart to take her away from that sunny land. Although it is true she did offer to come. I left her in Africa. Ah, well, I have missed her terribly. She wept again when we left, but I think I did the right thing. She was one of the best friends I ever had. It was she who first gave me the idea of learning the language of the animals and becoming an animal doctor. I often wonder if she remained happy in Africa, and whether I shall ever see her funny old solemn face again. Good old Polynesia, a most extraordinary bird. Well, well." Just at that moment, we heard the noise of someone running behind us. And turning around, we saw Jip, the dog, rushing down the road after us as fast as his legs could carry him. He seemed very excited about something, and as soon as he came up to us, he started barking and whining to the doctor in a peculiar way. Then the doctor, too, seemed to get all worked up and began talking and making odd signs to the dog. At length he turned to me, his face shining with happiness. "Polynesia has come back!" he cried. "Imagine it! Jip says she just arrived at the house. My, it's 5 years since I saw her. Excuse me a minute." He turned as if to go back home, but the parrot Polynesia was already flying toward us. The doctor clapped his hands like a child getting a new toy, while the swarm of sparrows in the roadway fluttered, gossiping up onto their fences, highly scandalized to see a gray and scarlet parrot skimming down an English lane. "How great! Polynesia's back." Oh, she came straight onto the doctor's shoulder, where she immediately began to talk a steady stream of language I could not understand. She seemed to have a terrible lot to say, and very soon the doctor had forgotten all about me and my squirrel and Jip and everything else, till at length the bird clearly asked him something about me. "Oh, excuse me, Stubbins," said the doctor. "I was so interested in listening to my old friend here. We must get on and see this squirrel of yours. Polynesia, this is Thomas Stubbins." The parrot on the doctor's shoulder nodded gravely toward me, and then, to my great surprise, said quite plainly in English, right, because parrots can talk, "How do you do? I remember the night you were born. It was a terribly cold winter. You were a very ugly baby." "Stubbins is anxious to learn animal language," said the doctor. "I was just telling him about you and the lessons you gave me when Jip ran up and told us that you had arrived." "Well," said the parrot, turning to me, "I may have started the doctor learning, but I never could have done even that if he hadn't first taught me to understand what I was saying when I spoke English. You see, many parrots can talk like a person, but very few of them understand what they are saying. They just say it because, well, because they fancy it's smart, or because they know they will get crackers given to them. But this time, by the time we had turned and were going toward my home, with Jip running in front and Polynesia still perched on the doctor's shoulder. The bird chattered incessantly, mostly about Africa, but now she spoke in English out of politeness to me. "How is Prince Bumpo doing?" asked the doctor. "Oh, I'm glad you asked me," said Polynesia. "I almost forgot to tell you. What do you think? Bumpo is in England." Bumpo was a character we met in the last book. "In England, you don't say," cried the doctor. "What on earth is he doing here? His father, the king, sent him here to a place called, Bulford, I think it was, to study lessons." Bulford, muttered the doctor. "I never heard of that place." "Oh, you mean Oxford?" "Yes, that's the place, Oxford," said Polynesia. "I knew it had a cattle in it somewhere." Oh, that's funny. Oxford's a great university in England. And he said Bulford because he said there was some kind of cattle in it. It was an ox, but he had thought it was a bull. That's funny. Or she had thought it. So, well, murmured the doctor. "Fancy Bumpo studying in Oxford. Well. There were great doings in Jolliginki when he left. He was scared to death to come. He was the first man from that country to go abroad, but his father made him come. He said that all the African kings were sending their sons to Oxford now. It was the fashion, and he would have to go. Poor Bumpo went off in tears, and everybody in the palace was crying too. You never heard such a hullabaloo. And how is Chee-Chee getting on?" "Chee-Chee," added the doctor in explanation to me, "was a pet monkey I had years ago. I left him too in Africa when I came away." "Well," said Polynesia, frowning, "Chee-Chee is not entirely happy. I saw a good deal of him the last few years. He got dreadfully homesick for you, and the house and the garden. It's funny, but I was just the same way myself. You remember how crazy I was to get back to the dear old land? And Africa is a wonderful country. I thought I was going to have a perfectly grand time, but somehow, I don't know, after a few weeks it seemed to get tiresome. I just couldn't seem to settle down. Well, to make a long story short, one night I made up my mind that I'd come back here and find you. So I hunted up old Chee-Chee and told him about it. He said he didn't blame me a bit, felt exactly the same way himself. Africa was so deadly quiet after the life we had led with you. He missed the stories you used to tell us out of your animal books, and the chats we used to have sitting around the kitchen fire on winter nights. The animals out there were very nice to us and all that, but somehow the dear kind creatures seemed a bit stupid. Chee-Chee said he had noticed it too, but I suppose it wasn't they who had changed. It was we who were different. When I left, poor old Chee-Chee broke down and cried. He said he felt as though his only friend were leaving him, though, as you know, he has simply millions of relatives there. He said it didn't seem fair that I should have wings to fly over here any time I liked, and him with no way to follow me. But mark my words, I wouldn't be a bit surprised if he found a way to come, some day. He's a smart lad, is Chee-Chee. At this point we arrived at my home. My father's shop was closed and the shutters were up, but my mother was standing at the door, looking down the street. "Good evening, Mrs. Stubbins," said the doctor. "It is my fault your son is late. I made him stay for supper while his clothes were drying. He was soaked to the skin, and so was I. We ran into each other in the storm, and I insisted on his coming into the house for shelter. I was beginning to get worried about him," said my mother. "I am thankful to you, sir, for looking after him so well and bringing him home." Don't mention it, said the doctor. "We have had a very interesting chat. Who might it be that I have the honor of addressing?" asked my mother, staring at the gray parrot perched on the doctor's shoulder. "Oh, I'm John Dolittle. I dare say your husband will remember me. He made me some very excellent boots about 4 years ago. They're really splendid," said the doctor, gazing down at his feet with great satisfaction. "The doctor has come to cure my squirrel, mother," said I. "He knows all about animals." "Oh, no," said the doctor, "not all, Stubbins, not all about them by any means. It is very kind of you to come so far to look at his pet," said my mother. "Tom is always bringing home strange creatures from the woods and the fields." "Is he?" said the doctor. "Perhaps he will grow up to be a naturalist some day. Who knows?" "Won't you come in?" asked my mother. "The place is a little untidy because I haven't finished the spring cleaning yet, but there's a nice fire burning in the parlor." "Thank you," said the doctor. "What a charming home you have." And after wiping his enormous boots very, very carefully on the mat, the great man passed into the house. End of the chapter.